we are faced with a false dichotomy, I believe. We're faced with the false dichotomy of either we're going to be very religious and, and a lot of people are going to lose their rights, and a lot of people are going to be mistreated, and a lot of people are going to not be treated with the dignity that they deserve as human beings. Or we're going to be very secular, we're going to keep religion out of, religion is not going to be a source of our public policy and our public discussion and so on, and everything's just going to be fine. But that latter comes with many, many, many problems. One of the problems is that we are doing violence to one of the core components of human flourishing, and that is religion. To believe in religion and to practice religion is not simply to have something in your mind that you're not allowed to say, nor is it something that it's in your mind, you're allowed to say it, but you're not allowed to act on it except privately. So for example, that if someone, as I was driving here with my son, someone almost smashed into my car, and I rolled down the window and I was really angry because I had a 4-year-old in the back seat, and he says, "Hey bro, you didn't get a hit, just calm down." And I immediately said, you're right, I actually gave him a really angry face, and I can muster an angry face, And I said, you're right, I'm sorry, I just have a 4-year-old, and so that sort of thing comes from a place of religion, because in my mind, for some people they may not even have anything, about God at all in their mind when that comes into play. But those who, there are those who take religion as something that motivates everything that they do. And their fear of God, or their caution of God, motivates everything that they do. Not everyone is like that, and those who are not like that can also be part of, obviously, the community of the good. But there are many of us who our public actions, our interactions with others are as well based on our sincerely held religious beliefs. And then, what about in public policy? There are a lot of misconceptions about the American constitutional order. For example, the notion that we are not allowed, as the policymakers are not allowed, legislators are not allowed, voters are not allowed, even people engaging in public discussions are not allowed to rely on or to even reference religious beliefs. But that's not accurate. That's not accurate because that itself violates the religious freedom of everyone, and that of those who would do so. And that religious freedom is not a statutory religious freedom, although it is protected by statute, Religious Freedom Restoration Act and others. It's not just protected by a constitution, although it is protected by the Constitution, the First Amendment, Free Exercise Clause. But it's also pre-political. That right exists because it is necessary for human flourishing, for the human being to be a whole human being, to have integrity as a human being. That is to say, we do not expect that when someone, let's say a lawmaker, goes out to cast a vote are they going to allow the death penalty, for example? Are they going to approve of a statute that permits the death penalty? But that lawmaker believes that that offends God, and that is a sin before God to allow that sort of thing. And so to expect that they do not draw upon that deeply held belief, it's not realistic. It's not fully taking into account what it means to be a human being. Now, when you get into the question of, well, you're a judge, and so you have the law before you, and there's the law might say one thing, and your beliefs might say something else. Now, what are you going to do? Or the statutes that require you to act a certain way might require you to act a certain way. Well, in those kind of situations, you're not expected to. You obviously have an oath that you have taken. So you have an oath that you've taken, which is before God. And it competes with what your it may compete with what your deeply held belief is. And an example of that is a judge who is ruling on, for example, whether or not someone should be found guilty of violating a law that says that people cannot obstruct abortion clinics. And let's say that judge is in there as part of his or her religious belief says, no, I cannot in good conscience send someone to jail for praying, by the facts in front of me, praying in front of an abortion clinic, because I believe that taking the life of an unborn child is wrong. And sending someone to jail for that is wrong. So what do they do in that situation? Well, in that situation, to maintain their integrity, they might recuse themselves, or they might, or they might follow the law, because the law in that situation, they've taken an oath to follow the law in that situation. So there are hard cases, there are difficult situations. But generally speaking, we and our founders, those who wrote and signed the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights on top of it, expected and allowed religion to be a source of it allowed it to inform the public good, the discussion of the public good, the debate over the public good. That doesn't mean that it always informs it. Doesn't mean that it's the only thing that informs it, because why? Happily, most human beings will agree on the vast majority of things. I mean, even if we don't agree in the details and how things work out, the fact that we agree on the fundamentals, which I'm about to discuss, that's actually the substance of my talk here. The fact that we agree on the fundamentals, then on the premises, then we can work backwards from that and to say, well, perhaps like your understanding of how that is applied in this situation, your reasoning, maybe we can talk about that, or you can point out how my reasoning is wrong, or maybe our understanding of the facts is wrong, or there are aspects of it that I haven't completely seen. And so my approach has been, I have just completed, and I'm continuing to work on actually, a project that involves 30 scholars, Muslims, Christians, and Jews. I have to say, this was my idea, and I conceived it, and has been funded at this point, over $300,000 from both center-left and center-right foundations. Why? Because they saw the value of focusing on fundamentals, and this is called the Virtues Project. And in the Virtues Project, we brought together all of these different scholars, Islamic scholars, scholars of Judaism, scholars of Christianity, to discuss the very foundational questions of what does it mean to be good? What does it mean to be a good person? And so we explored the classical schema of virtues that were laid out by Aristotle, but were mentioned for example, 4 Maccabees, mentioned in Plato, mentioned in other places, and the scholars of Islam almost unanimously agreed on this schema that it made sense. And that is the 4 cardinal virtues: justice, wisdom, temperance, courage, and then other virtues that flow from these, or that complement these, or that are necessary to implement them. And then friendship. Friendship being the culmination of all those, or in the Catholic view, they would call it charity. Friendship being seeing one another, the good of one another, as our own good, as identical with our own good. So this obviously is has a counterpart in the Golden Rule, which is mentioned in the Old Testament, of course, in a very beautiful place, which I believe it's in Deuteronomy. You'll have to Leviticus, thank you. And it's talking about all of the, and you just have to. I'm just paraphrasing here. I would love to have someone quote it to me specifically, but it's listing all these things that you shall not do. When you reap, and that you shall do. When you reap the wheat, then leave some of it in the field for your neighbors, and so on and so on. Mentioning all these very specific things that people are supposed to do to be kind to one another and to look out for one another, and then it sums it all up by saying,
love your neighbor as yourself.
Love your neighbor as yourself. And so we know the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad. He said, لا تؤمنوا حتى يحبوا حتى تحبوا لأخي ما تحبوا لنفسك. You do not believe until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. And our ulama, our scholars, said that this does not just apply to Muslims. When it says your brother, akhuk, your brother, it does not. And by the way, I messed up the grammar of that. Haytham over here can point that out.
Close enough.
Close enough. You get my point. It doesn't mean akhi here, his brother. It doesn't mean his Muslim brother only. It means his brother in humanity. And we also often hear people say, "Oh, you're not supposed to say brother in humanity." But there's some scholars who say that. Oh yeah, well our scholars were saying that. Our scholars were using that term, brother in humanity. Why? Because we are all children of Adam. We're all children of Adam, and so we are on that level all brothers and sisters. And so we have to, and every single one of us, as children of Adam, the Prophet said that Adam was created in the image of the Most Merciful. Doesn't mean, obviously, and the Jewish rabbis explained in great depth, doesn't mean that Adam looks like God. We know that there's nothing like him. And so the rabbis actually had really in-depth discussions where, if you go and look at it, parallel very much, because they were very concerned not to be anthropomorphous. But what it does mean, in the end, whatever else it does mean that may not be knowable to the human being, what it does mean is that each of us, have a dignity, and we are, and that must be respected by one another. And like God says in the Quran, He says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, and we have made the children of Adam noble. And our ulama, like for example, Fakhruddin al-Razi and many, many others, they said that here the nobility is in not only the soul, but it includes the soul, but it also includes the physical body. And so not only can the soul can the soul not be oppressed by one another, not only must the human soul be treated with dignity of all human beings, but also even the body cannot be oppressed. And we know, for example, as well, that the hadith, beautiful hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ, peace be upon him, was in the market, and a funeral went by, and it was a Jewish funeral. A Jewish man had passed away, and the Prophet stood up as he walked past, and someone said to him, one of his companions said, "You know that's a Jewish guy, right?" And he said, "Is it not a human soul? Is he not a human soul?" And Ibn Arabi, the mystic and also very orthodox scholar, a lot of people think he's just some sort of way out there guy that Sufis quote, and I love Sufis, but that they're, this is some unorthodox. No, Ibn Arabi was actually very orthodox, and he, in his discussion, said, and why would he not stand? When the soul of this man came from the abode of holiness and purity, why would he not stand? So this does not mean that we are universalists, so we believe that everyone is going to heaven and so on. That's not what that means. Yes, but it means that we treat every human being with a basic level of dignity. And things flow from that. Things flow from that. So, and Ibn Qayyim had a really interesting commentary on that, by the way. For anyone watching, yes, there are different explanations to that, but he combined all three. He said, number one, he stood because of the angel of death. The angel of death went by, and this is mentioned in some of the narrations. And so he was standing for the angel of death. And it's also said that, well, no, he stood up because he didn't want people to take death as something normal. He didn't want them to trivialize death. So that any death, any dead person, any funeral that goes by, you stand for that. And the last thing he said, Ibn Qayyim said, and the third thing is because it was a human soul. This is a human soul that you stand for. And so, what I want to say about the term democracy, this is my last thing here. I think that the term democracy term is actually can be quite vague. Just in the same way that people throw around the term fascism to mean people that they politically disagree with. Someone who votes for Trump, he's a fascist. Well, at this point, the term fascist, or for that matter, Islamist. The term Islamist has actual a useful, it's a useful word, or fundamentalist. It's a useful word in some situations, but people just use it so much that then it starts to lose meaning, and so we have to then get away from what is the term and talk about the substantive qualities of what we're talking about. So when we're talking about democracy, I think we need, actually, as the Rabbi said, we can't focus on the question of, well, was there elections, Or for that matter, I would frankly somewhat disagree with the New York Times' list of things, because I think many of those things were really somewhat contingent and historical, related to America, the United States' particular situation at a certain time. And it may have been certain certain resolutions of problems like James Madison's separation of powers, which doesn't necessarily, you can definitely see how it, helped prevent a lot of problems in America. But it's not necessarily, is that is it like a sine qua non of the good life, of a good society? I don't know. I think what we're really what we want to identify when we talk about democracy and are we achieving it and how are we going to get there and what do religions say about it, and do religions, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, have the resources to support it, then we can't focus on the term as much as on the substance of what we're talking about. What are the actual qualities that are that must be present for a society to conduce towards the good of all human beings as much as humanly possible? Thank you.
You guys have given us so much to think about.